So, on the other hand, the groundwater is one thing that is, I would always say that it's a savior of your life. Whenever you have, it's like I always tell in my class, it's a amount or the money that I have in the bank. Whenever I want, I am supposed to take and then utilize it. But on the other hand, from the bank, if I take every money, then there is no use of bank storing. So that's the main reason point here we should look at it. And because the groundwater is one system that which will be helping a lot with without much kind of a problem, I would like to say some 3 or 4 points on that. What is the real advantage of this groundwater? Groundwater can store as much water as you want because there is no limit. There is not even a watershed. So the groundwater can be stored at a different point, and also it has a good sociological principle that it does not bother about whether it is you are from which district or other district. It will go anywhere and then give the water to all the people. The second is you need not construct a big dam or spending a lot of money. So only thing is that you have to naturally put it inside. That I think we may have to do quite a lot on this. In fact, even though we talk a lot about surface water, which is slightly higher than whereas 410 BCM is our groundwater availability, whereas that is around 630 BCM is the surface water. But all the surface water goes mostly around more than 40% goes to sea. So we are finally, if you look at it, the groundwater is going to save our country. So I think our country has to wake up and then start working on this. Because water is available, we have been over exploiting. And I would say it is not overuse, it is abuse. Abusing of the groundwater. Unfortunately, groundwater has a good chance for not getting polluted by people. But unfortunately, it has some geogenic pollution like arsenic, fluoride, and uranium. All these things which were there, that only in certain areas. So we may have to come out with some good thing. I think this is because it is below the ground, we are not giving importance to it. I hope this particular panel discussion will bring out the awareness about this particular system. And in fact, many times people say that we have to spend a lot of money for groundwater pumping. But if you look at a unit cost of surface water to bring to your house, maybe creating a dam, creating a canal, creating a water distribution system, and then get that same unit water to your home, it will be almost more than 25 times than the groundwater pumping. Okay, so sometimes we always say that we are giving free power and so on, but at the same time, everybody should understand that this is not something that is going to be there for a long time. And the last point which I would say, groundwater is a sustainable water, because whatever I put it in the bank, it will be there not only for you and also for your son or grandson or grand-grandson. This water will be available if you are judiciously using it. So there is no time limit that you can. Whereas surface water, if I store more water on a reservoir, it will all go as evaporation, whereas groundwater may not have. So I think this is a very scarce resource and it's a good resource, and let us utilize it judiciously. And next time, let us not spend water from groundwater as because it is available in my backyard or it is in my house. I think this is where we may have to do. And I also say that many times that there is a lot of people say about recharge. The recharge, my very simple principle is, unless all people do recharge, there is no use of recharge. It will be only 1 or 2 people here and there. If they are doing recharging, it won't help. So everyone has to do. Every apartment has to do. Everyone as an individual, we have to do in our house. I think with that few words, and I think the usefulness of groundwater, if we can protect it, if we can save it, and if we can have a good management of this groundwater, I think that will be the savior of our future, because our population is increasing. In fact, there is recently there is a small article, our demand pattern has increased something like 2 to 3 times compared to some 10, 20 years back. So I think this is something which is very important, because our culture earlier, now every day we are taking 2 times bath or 3 times bath people are taking. So the demand for water also is increasing, but water availability is very less. So one has to, I'm not saying that we should not take 2 times bath, but I think look at on the amount of water that what we are utilizing. So let us all, the IWA mainly to look at on requested the experts, Professor Janakarajan, Professor Himanshu. I am not seeing Professor Himanshu. Is here around? Himanshu? Right, very good. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. And I have heard about your organization quite a lot. So I think they are doing specifically for groundwater in Pune. And Professor Jothiprakash is here, and he is also IIT Bombay, and our own friend and Professor Elango, who has agreed to me at the last minute. In fact, and I should mention 4 o'clock only I contacted him, and he has agreed on it, because the other person, Dr. Kulkarni, is supposed to join. Suddenly his wife had some fever. So nowadays we are all worried about this corona. So he has gone to hospital. So we are, I think, thank you, Professor Elango, for agreeing it. I am sure that he is the greatest expert on it. I think now I request Professor Janakarajan to say a small words, because he need not have some introduction, but I think the courtesy demands that I should ask him. And Jayan has not sent me the biodata, but with the assumption that I know about him quite well. We have been interacting with him when he was professor in MIDS, and now he is the president of the ASEAN forum. I think that is one great thing. And the more important thing is he will be fighting for the water. Okay. And fighting in the sense, I am not saying that fight with the people, but the kind of recognition what the surface water and groundwater that it need to be or ought to be given. That for that he is one person who works with people, works with the expert, and works with the government. I think we can't get a person beyond him on this. So thank you very much for agreeing, Professor Janakarajan. Welcome, Dr. Subramaniam sir from MOF. Right.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, sir.
So,
thank you. It's
thank you very much, and I am sure that this panel discussion will be really very good, and we can, if we can get some good recommendations, we will be able to from IWA to government. Thank you very much for giving an opportunity for IWA to host this panel discussion. Over to Professor Janakarajan.
Okay, thank you, Professor Morgan, for hosting this very important event. And I'm saying this is a very important event because of all water resources today, groundwater has taken an extremely important role in building our economy and in contributing to our economy. You all may be surprised if I tell you that the whole economy will crash if the groundwater depletes completely, because our economy is completely dependent upon groundwater today. Our growth rate, all that you're talking about, a growth rate of 5%, 4%, 6%, it's now crashed. But still, the growth rate, whatever that you have, is now dependent upon the groundwater. It is not an exaggeration. Let me tell you, today 70% of the gross cropped area in agriculture depends upon the groundwater. 70%. It used to be something like 25%, 15%, 26 in the 1960s. Today it is 75% of the gross cropped area in agriculture is dependent upon groundwater. 80% of drinking water comes from groundwater, and 90% of the industrial need comes from the groundwater. If there is no groundwater, the economy growth rate in the entire economy is going to really crash down. So that is the kind of a situation that we are in. But the groundwater conditions is not comfortable at all. We got a very eminent speakers, panelists. They're going to tell you what the problems are. But let me tell you, in the 60s, in the mid 60s of the rail watershed, when the green revolution technology was introduced, there was very little groundwater irrigation that was in use. People are extensively using canal irrigation and tank irrigations, spring canals, and so on and so forth. Groundwater was restricted to only in some areas where it was available at 10 and 15 feet, and it was all open well. Today, with the green revolution technology, which warranted for very controlled, timely application of water and quality irrigation, people have gone in for groundwater very extensively and intensively. And now with the availability of credit, people have gone in for deep bore wells, side bore wells, and Elango will tell you, they've gone up to 800 feet, 900 feet, even in Tamil Nadu. It is something unknown for the state of Tamil Nadu, but then we used to hear about it in Gujarat and Rajasthan. And Punjab and Haryana, which are boasting of having 5 rivers, today they are the most exploited in terms of the groundwater. They are in both the states, groundwater is overexploited. They are in peril. Now, this is the kind of a situation we are in. Today, what are we going to do? Are we going to sustain this a very important resource? If you don't sustain, what is going to happen? What are the challenges in groundwater governance? And Professor Morgan said there's going to be geogenic pollution, the water quality problems, but even the industrial water, even the domestic sewage contributes to groundwater pollution very, very extensively. The very classic case is the Yamuna Basin in Delhi. And you will also see in Noyal and the Palar Basin in Tamil Nadu, and in Krishna Basin, very heavily polluted because of the groundwater pollution, because of the industrial pollution. Now, many industries claiming that they are, in fact, zero liquid discharge. They claim zero liquid discharge, but unfortunately, I know in many places they are discharging their industrial effluent into the ground through the deep bores. Unfortunate. It happens in Kadalur Sipcot industrial estate in the chemical industry complex. I mean, all kinds of problems exist, but we cannot survive without groundwater. We have come to that kind of a situation. How are we going to manage? This is a very tricky situation that we are in. In fact, Professor Morgan said that we are depleting and your ATM card may not fetch you money if we don't have a deposit. That is indeed a fact. We are depleting. We are in the process of depleting. We are on the road to deplete, but the next stage is going to be desertification. So what are we going to do? Unfortunately, this is the access to groundwater, which is really going to cause a very, very serious problem, not just because you have problem of access, but it is also giving a huge problem of inequity in the society. If you have a groundwater access, you are a big man. If you don't, you are nobody in the villages. And now 80% of the farmers are small and marginal. And if you don't have access to groundwater, agriculture is going to crash. What are we going to do? It's a very, very tricky situation. I've got a very eminent panelist today. And I'm going to request one by one, and I will be requesting each one of them to take about 15 to 20 minutes. And first, I would like to invite Professor Jothiprakash from IIT Mumbai, who got a very extensive experience in groundwater modeling and GIS application and remote sensing application. I don't have to tell you, got a very large publications, a very, very extensive researcher. But I'm going to pose to him a few questions for him to really dwell upon. One, we are hearing that in many states, in particular Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and parts of Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, groundwater level has dropped so deep due to overexploitation. Do you think it is possible to recharge groundwater through rainfall at the deeper level? You think the regular rainfall can recharge the groundwater? If not, what is the way of recharge? This is going to be a very important issue. If you cannot recharge, you can't sustain. What is the way in which you can recharge the groundwater? How to reach that level of 700 feet and 800 feet? Second question to you. To what extent remote sensing methods will help to identify the groundwater availability, levels of our extraction, and to devise methods of recharge? Will we be in a position to really understand the levels of our extraction through remote sensing application? Is it possible? Question number 3 to you, sir. How do you define or explain the process of groundwater depletion? You see, the depletion we all know. How do you explain that process? It is just not the hydrogeological process, also socio-economic process. So how do you define and explain the process of groundwater depletion? Is it possible to recharge groundwater even after depletion? Once you discharge, you completely deplete at zero. There is zero groundwater availability. Will we be in a position to recharge even at that level, at that stage? Please explain. And last question to you, sir. What are the hydrogeological and ecological consequences of groundwater overexploitation? What are the ecological consequences? What do you, sir, Dr. Jothiprakash?
Sir, thank you very much, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for explaining or giving me an opportunity to explain my ideas in front of big peers like Professor Mohan, Professor Elango, who all work a lot on groundwater and hydrological parameters all over the country and also in other countries. Before answering your 4 points, sir, I would just like to say that this groundwater has been stored, has been built up, not in 1 year, not in 5 years. It is over the period of millions of the years. The infiltrated water has percolated and it has started building up. And we have stored a huge quantity of water over the millions of the years. There are different geological formations. Maybe Professor Elango will explain it in detail. We have just aquifers which are lying above around the ground level. Right? That is called unconfined aquifer, where you just dig a pit and put the water, it will get recharged. And we have confined aquifers, which is lying very deep. To reach that aquifer is a geological formation which bears water, which can store and transmit water. So to reach such a confined aquifers, you have to dig a deep borehole. So you will go through large hard rock strata, which is called aquifuge. Then again you will get water. That is where aquifer. So in this case, there are 2 ways of recharging. Right? One is through a borehole. Other one is identify the starting point of this aquifer where it is exposed to ground level and then recharge it. When we have this, our whole country, our geographical location is such that our south side, we don't have much perennial rivers, right? Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, right? And most of the area, it's a dry. Whereas in the north side, it is full of huge flowing rivers. So by thousands and thousands of years, our forefathers have managed the water resources, surface water as well as groundwater resources in an integrated manner. Right? If you see our south, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, part of Maharashtra, there are no large rivers, no large dams. Our forefathers have constructed small water bodies called irrigation tanks. Right? If Tamil Nadu alone had around 40,000 irrigation tanks, the first crop season is through surface water, and the second crop season is through groundwater. And it is not a community, individual based wells, they are all community based wells. I am talking about 100 years back or 150 years back. So if you have this type of community wells, what happened? We don't overdraft. So the volume of water extracted from the ground is more or less equal to the volume of water recharged by the upstream irrigation tank. So there became a balance, right? In terms of urban areas, temple tanks are the largest rainwater harvesting structures our forefathers have constructed. Right? The moment the temple tank gets water, right? The entire aquifer of that urban area gets recharged. And the size of the temple tank, I think we might have visited several temple tanks, several temples. Not all temple tanks are of same size, same shape, and same depth. The shape, size, volume of water depends upon the type of aquifer underlying below the temple tanks. Otherwise, what happens? Suppose if there is no aquifer and you have constructed a huge temple tank, unnecessarily it will be acting as a storage pond. But that water has to be replenished every year. To have it, it has to be recharged. Then next year, fresh water comes. This is how our forefathers have managed the available water, that is from precipitation. For all resources, rainfall is the input. This is how they have managed the surface water and groundwater in an integrated manner. But what happens after industrialization? We have two important inventions which has helped us to do overdrafting. The first one is the electric motors, right? So the moment you put the electric motors, it will pump out more than the recharged quantity, right? The second one is the boreholes. The boreholes can reach a confined aquifer, unconfined aquifers, perched aquifers, even aquitars or leaky aquifers, everything, wherever water is available, just squeeze it. Mohan sir has told that it is like a bank. I just add one more word to that. It is not just like a savings bank. That means in savings bank, you can take only the amount which you are putting. For example, if you have recharged X quantity of water this year, you can take only X quantity of water. That is savings bank. But groundwater is like current bank, current account. You can do overdrafting. That means balance can go for negative. That means you are taking the volume of water more than what you have placed it inside, right? So this is how we have started with using groundwater for only one season, that also for irrigated dry crops. That's why even when we were young, we used to grow rice in the first monsoon period. Second monsoon, I'm talking about tank irrigation commands. Forget about reservoirs, rivers which flows with full of water. Most of our southern states, they used to irrigate first season with irrigated surface water for rice. The second season is for pulses. Third season is fallow, which is a very good crop rotation method, right? It is not fallow. The Mother Earth is getting the required fertilizers from the atmosphere through that. So the third monsoon is dry summer monsoon. So this is how we have managed. Somehow now we have ended up in the overdraft. Sir, you said that not only southern state, north state also started exploiting the groundwater. Yes, sir. We have already started, right? Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Karnataka, everywhere we are using more than the recharged quantity. And you also said that other states like Punjab, Haryana, Gujarat, Rajasthan, not part of Maharashtra, all dry belt of Maharashtra, Karnataka, the groundwater has gone deep. The reason is when you pump more than the recharged quantity, then water level goes down. So it can goes down until what? Suppose if it is an aquifer lying on the ground, it will go up to next impermeable layer. If you puncture it, then below aquifer, then take all the water. So you go on puncturing. So you will be exploiting not from one aquifer, multiple aquifers. The over exploitation is due to, you yourself told that 70% of cropped area depends on groundwater. There are two types of agriculture which has taken this groundwater. So one is extensive agriculture, another one is intensive agriculture. Extensive agriculture is, last year it was only, I have 10 acres. Last year I used one bore well, so I irrigated only 5 hectares. This year I put 3 boreholes, so So I am irrigating 10 hectares for one season. And the other, this is extensive. Every time I am increasing the area under irrigation. Another one is extensive irrigation. I have only 2 acres. So throughout the year, I am growing the crops. No gap, no keeping quiet for the land. It's like a production. So I am extensively using the groundwater to produce a huge quantity of water. These two things have forced us and non-availability of surface water stored. All dams are designed for either irrigated dry crop for a certain period and certain area. When we want to use for different crops, then you need to take the groundwater. That is how people have started using groundwater. The first question is it possible to recharge in these states? Yes, sir. It is possible. I will just want to say, only thing is we have to select appropriate method for appropriate location. In Tamil, the land is divided into 5 classifications, right? Kurinji, Mullai, Marudam, Neidal, Palai, right? That means the type of rainwater harvesting structure which I have constructed in one location cannot be used in another location. I think those who are not from Tamil, Kurinji, Mullai, Marudam, Neidal, Palai is 5 classification of soil type or land type. The first one, Kurinji, is Malayum, Malay Sarnadum, Mullai, Kadum, Kadu Sarnadum, Marudam, Vayalum, Vayal Sarnadum. Oh, I think, sorry, I am going to. That first one is forest area. The second one is hilly area. The third is plains where you do irrigated crops. Neidal is the seashore area. Kadalum, Kadal Sarnadum. Palai is desert where it is full of sand. This desert sand is different from our beach type sand, that is oceanography area. The type of rainwater harvesting structure which I am supposed to design in one land use may not be successful in other location. For example, in hilly areas, contour bunding, right? Trenches, contour benches, which can reduce the runoff time period and increase the infiltration opportunity time. This is the technical term which we have to keep in mind when we are designing a type of rainwater harvesting structure. It means we have to increase the infiltration opportunity time. Just Professor Mohan also said that 40% of the surface water goes into the sea because it doesn't have time to stop. There is no place for it to stop. Altogether, it reaches the river and then finally it reaches the ocean. So the main idea of any rainwater harvesting structure is to stop the water for few time period, thereby increase the infiltration opportunity time. Like high intensity rainfall after a great summer, you see huge quantity of water might have flown in the streams. But when we dig the ground, not even few centimeter is wet because there is no infiltration opportunity time for the water to enter. And it is possible, sir, even at a deeper level. But the type of rainwater harvesting structure which we have to design, I told that contour bunding, contour benches, right, check dams in hilly areas. Then in agricultural land, it is farm ponds, percolation ponds, all right, and then recharge pits. In urban areas, recharge pits are very helpful. So our forefathers have given only 5 lands: Kurinji, Mullai, Marudam, Neidal, Palai, and through industrialization, and we have created one more land use that is called urban or urbanization. Right? That means we have completely paved with good aquifers. Minjur aquifer is a good example for that. Chennai aquifers. So that means when 80% of the good aquifer is covered, there is no place for the water to enter. It has to just run off. In such places of unconfined aquifer, recharge pits, small percolation tanks, temple tanks can also be converted into a good rainwater harvesting structures. So it is possible to recharge the groundwater, sir. The way in which we have recharged, as I just explained, that is why 20-25 years back, percolation ponds were the motto to recharge the aquifer. I think Professor Mohan sir knows that that is where first I started doing research with him. We studied effectiveness of percolation ponds. At that time, government was constructing thousands and thousands of percolation ponds wherever space is available. And this study indicates that we cannot construct the percolation pond wherever we want or wherever space is available. The first thing is there should be a small stream or something which brings water to it. Then there should be a good groundwater extraction in the downstream side. And we have studied 2-3 percolation ponds and submitted this to the groundwater. It was very successful. So the type of structure which you need to select depends upon geohydrological, especially this geological condition of the rainwater harvesting structure where we are constructing. So if we select appropriate rainwater harvesting structure at appropriate locations, it is possible even to recharge at deeper levels. Now people are using that dead bores. That means we have digged a deep borehole. I don't have groundwater. So now what happens? They are converting that deep boreholes into rainwater harvesting structures. And then recently there are a lot of videos, and in Facebook you can see the boreholes which has not yielded any water when it was digged, and they are converted into recharging structure for deep aquifers. After 2-3 years, definitely you can start drafting water from that, sir. I think in entire states, whatever you have mentioned, either it is North India or South India, farm ponds. Farm ponds is one of the successful way to store and recharge the borehole where we have in a small farm areas. Then the second question you have sent is remote sensing. I think Professor Elango sir will explain a lot. He also did. It is possible, sir, especially 30 years back when we did with very coarse remote sensing map. Now with the finer remote sensing map, it is possible to identify appropriate recharging locations by overlaying various geological parameters, right? GIS maps. But to find whether groundwater is available or not through remote sensing map, I think we have to look into deeper of our ground penetrating radars. It is still under research mode, but to identify suitable sites for rainwater harvesting, GIS is very much used, and there are a lot of papers in our ISRS also. I'll quickly finish, sir. The third one is, how do you define and explain the process of depletion? It's only a story, sir, what I told. Depletion is the word. Suppose if my groundwater availability is 1000 meter cube in the entire aquifer zone, and I am recharging every year only 10 meter cube. If I draft more than that 10 meter cube, that is depletion, sir.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, Professor Jothiprakash, can you take another 2-3 minutes and summarize it?
So that is the depletion definition. And even under over depletion condition also, we can recharge it. It is saving it. And hydrogeological and ecological consequences, when we have overdrafted, there is no hydro, only geological formations will be there. It is like a dry area. And ecology, sir, when there is no water, no ecology. Slowly, slowly it will die, and slowly, slowly we will be converting it into a desert. So I hope I have explained, sir. It is possible to recharge, but you need some time for the recharged water to reach the existing groundwater or to build up the groundwater. People say that, oh, this year I have recharged in my percolation pond 10,000 meter cube, but there is no water in the ground because we have overdrafted. So whatever we are putting is like popcorn for the hungry of elephant through recharging. So you need to really have huge quantity of rainwater harvesting methods, but appropriate selection at appropriate location will definitely increase the groundwater availabilities. Thanks for the
Okay.
opportunity, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Jothiprakash, for explaining the technical details and also the issues relating to depletion and so on. I still have one question. Probably we can come back to that later.
Yes, sir.
The key question that I was asking you was, when we have really gone up to 700, 800 feet, in some places it is over 1,000 feet. And is it possible to really recharge through the normal process? Or have you got to do any special procedure? I mean, special rainwater harvesting structures you create in order to really reach that level? Because through a normal rainfall, you will not be in a position to recharge because rainfall stops with the 15-20 days of rainfall. After that, it is going to stop. But then how are we going to reach that level of groundwater level dropping? We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. I think it's a very, very important issue. That is, as far as groundwater is concerned. Now, the fact of the matter is also that there is a growing recharge. There is a growing mismatch. If the extraction is much, much more than the recharge. And this gap between recharge and extraction is growing year by year. So that is really going to contribute a very serious challenge. That is when we are also reaching, there is a danger of reaching the depletion. Depletion might lead to desertification. What are we going to do? This is a huge challenge. Now, may I now invite my good friend Himanshu Kulkarni, who is also a hydrogeologist from Pune University. He is the founder, trustee, and the executive director of a think tank called Advanced Center for Water Resources Development and Management. It's called ACWADAM, located in Pune. It's a non-profit research organization, and is also a kind of an activist and implementation organization. They have done a very extensive work. I know Kulkarni for a long time. He has been a sort of a very involved researcher and also involved interventionist as far as the groundwater application is concerned. And his experience in Maharashtra is really amazing. Recently, he has done quite a lot of work in groundwater related issues in the urban areas, urban needs, urban groundwater needs, and so on. Now, Himanshu, you are here. Take over.
Yeah. I thought I'll just to begin with touch upon a few important points that were covered. And before that, maybe thank you very much for inviting me and having me here. I thought I was kind of, while Professor Mohan and Jyoti were also talking.
Himanshu, can I intervene now? Like I mentioned to Jothiprakash, some 4 questions to you. If you can really dwell upon that, it will be very good. The first question to you is, given the fact that the groundwater irrigation is becoming more and more expensive, how far is it accessible to small and marginal farmers who constitute over 80% of farming community? Question number 2, is there intersectoral competing demand for groundwater? Intersectoral, agriculture, industry, urban needs, and so on. What is the extent of urban dependence upon groundwater for domestic needs? Question number 3 to you. To what extent groundwater is abused in India? Does overexploitation affect water quality? Question number 4. Can you explain the process of emergence of a new inequity? Access to groundwater itself is really creating a new inequity among the farming community due to the emergence of groundwater as a dominant productive resource. So these are the issues that I have for you. So now please take over. Sorry for the intervention.
Yeah, that's okay. So, just sort of to begin the quick response, I think all your questions are great questions, Janak. And before the response, I thought I just quickly also reiterate that I represent the organization that I work for, ACWADAM. We work across India's diverse aquifer typology. We started in Maharashtra, but we worked across almost all the states. I mean, yes, except possibly very intensive work in Assam. Except for that, I think we worked in all the states in the last 22 years. We do a lot of training, both in the form of formal education at institutions, but a lot of capacity building with various groups. Our work on the ground is through a research mode. We call it an action research mode. And we also work on outreach, both with communities, with citizens, and even in the policy space. Now, I thought I'll just begin by, reiterating what Professor Mohan was telling us, that it's both a silent savior. Groundwater is both a silent savior, and as my very eminent friend Tushar Shah has written in his book, it is also the lender of the last resort. And I have actually seen this on the ground, that when people run into a water scarcity, they pray by looking up, they pray to the heavens, but they actually go in search of water below the ground. They look up but search below. And on that note, I'd like to take you up on your first question in terms of what I call the marginalization of the marginalized. So let me begin by posing 4 very quick points on that question. Now, I think when we look at equity, and I prefer to call it equitability rather than equity, because equity is a word that is now very smoothened out by the financial sector, and it has a very different ring to it. So I believe equitability in access and distribution of water in general, and groundwater in particular, takes a back seat even in some of the most noble causes that are trying to tackle groundwater crisis. It's made out to be a very high-hanging fruit, very challenging, and it therefore gains the lowest priority on a solution agenda, which is emerging in a lot of things, in a lot of responses in India today. My second point for this particular question is the point that the question raises itself, that what happens to the marginalized? What happens to the small users? In fact, if you look at the agricultural landholding in India, it is second only to the continent of Africa. On an average, sort of at a very, very gross average, Africa is about 1 hectare and India is 1.15. And therefore, if we bring all of these together, if we look at what's called the atomistic access to groundwater, so what happens is when aquifers deplete, or when aquifers or groundwater sources get contaminated, or the third impact, which is depleting base flows that leads to the rivers drying up, or leads to the complete depletion of non-monsoon or non-precipitation river flows, the marginalized suffer the most. The marginalized are the ones which get hit most, whether it's due to depletion, whether it's due to contamination, or whether it's due to even river depletion, which is one of the consequences of severe groundwater exploitation. So I want to come back to the third particular issue on this one, which is the marginalization of the margins. I call it the marginalization of the margins for various reasons. If you actually look at the competition around groundwater, which is what the last 50 years have taught us, and as both Professor Mohan and Jyoti were alluding to, that we have gone in the last 50 years from a long legacy of community usage of groundwater, sharing of sources, which was there for almost 3,000 to 4,000 years globally. And we've gone to a very individualized, privatized access to groundwater through an almost inherent competition around the resource. And when this competition unfolds, it leads to a majority who suffer as access becomes challenging and expensive both. So the options for access are few and far between. And even if they exist, they are too expensive for the small and marginal to really to sort of resort to. For example, usually those with the shallowest, traditional, long-term sustainable sources, those with the least number of sources, and those with small farms suffer the most because they don't have too many options. They are met with very serious challenges. You simply don't have enough water in the shallow aquifer. And therefore, the only option left for you is to go deeper. However, more than that, they are often the ones, and I want to say this very clearly, they are often the ones who come up with the most innovative of solutions. And I am talking about this not just from an activist point of view, but from a practitioner's point of view. When I work at the options that come forth in some of the most marginalized tribal areas where we are working, not just in Maharashtra, but in places like Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, with a variety of civil society and government partners. These are the people who come up with so-called community solutions, so-called solutions around the sharing of water, around the participatory management of water. And last but not least, the question of equity is not just a social one. If you actually think about aquifers, then groundwater gets naturally distributed under larger areas. I mean, just that with surface water, we try to centralize the stocks of water. We bring water from longer and longer distances and store it on the ground at one location. Now, the same amount of water, let's say in a dam, is naturally distributed under larger areas, which first and foremost makes it sort of distributed in such a way that more people can access it. However, the natural conditions in the aquifer itself provide an unequal sort of a factor of inequity from a natural point, in the sense that if you look at the storage and transmission properties of a single aquifer, they vary. In hydrogeology, it's called heterogeneity. So heterogeneity is another dimension of inequity. So there are actually two levels of inequity that one has to contend with, and one has to come up with sort of solutions in the management paradigm. One is natural, the other one is social. Coming to your next point, which is really about the intersectoral competing demands for water. I would just very briefly sum it up that yes, there is an intersectoral competing demand for water. But unlike conflicts which are out in the open and which you can contest, competition is seldom contested because there's always a second option or alternative, at least for a chosen few, to go into that competition and enter into that competition. Now, if we actually look at competition around groundwater, I think you can divide it into, well, 2 or 3 broad categories. It's actually also intrasectoral competition. So for example, in agriculture, where similar kind of users and users compete with each other through increasing numbers, depths of wells or pump capacity, sometimes all of these, or between sectors like drinking water and agriculture, even in a single village. The abysmally small annual drinking water demand is actually competing with the larger demand for irrigation and agriculture. You find this competition, it is inherent in every single rural household in India, this competition. We seldom see it. But I think what is even more serious is the competition between sectors. And I believe with drinking water in the urban versus drinking water in the rural, you can't put them on the same platform because they suffer from very different kinds of competitions. In the rural space, it's actually the drinking water which suffers, which is a sufferance in the entire competition. In the urban space, it's actually the rural sometimes which suffers on account of that demand. And I'm not sort of passing any judgments here, I'm just making simple observations. So to summarize that point, it's a user versus user competition, but it's also a use versus use competition. And that brings me to the second part of that question, which is about the extent of urban dependence. Recent literature, overall, a lot of literature showing that 50%, 52%, 53% of urban water supplies are groundwater. This often goes unrecognized and unacknowledged. Our own report on Pune's aquifers from a year and a half ago shows that the total water we use, out of the total water that we use, 20 to 25% is based on groundwater. Mind you, Pune has perhaps had the most reliable civic water supplies across urban India through a long-standing, reasonably reliable supply from our reservoirs. But as the city grew, our groundwater footprint became larger. In fact, 20 to 25% for Pune city means 3 to 4 TMC at a very, very conservative estimate. So you can imagine what's happening to many of the other cities which have less assured formal civic water supplies. Now, if we actually look at the third question which you asked about the extent of groundwater abuse and does overexploitation affect water quality? I'm actually not sure whether I can afford to use the word abused. I would prefer the word misuse simply because it's a case of they know not what they do. You know, as Jesus Christ told the world on the crucifix, that it's a case of they really do not know what they do. And I think many urbanites probably do not even know that they use groundwater. I'm sort of talking about the reasonably high level of ignorance, which leads to the lack of acknowledgement on the groundwater that we use. And therefore, it's more of misuse than abuse. I'm sure some abuse, but the numbers are abysmally small. However, during the last 30 to 40 years, what I find as a part of the abuse is that I have watched the subject of groundwater being trivialized. I'll tell you how. When, for example, we tell people, oh, we work on the subject of groundwater, and then the first response that comes out is, oh, groundwater, that means you are the people who go looking for groundwater, to look for a place to put a hole in the ground, which leads to digging or drilling and installing a pump. A large critical mass of our society deals with groundwater only through this very, very narrow window. And thereafter, it has remained open-ended, despite caution, warnings, and even regulation. We have not gone beyond this sort of self-established, trivialized paradigm on groundwater. We need an improved form of groundwater literacy to turn this around. And only a very large-scale groundwater literacy campaign can lead to a better improvement of our an understanding or comprehension on groundwater. And I think such a campaign should not just be restricted to slogans, but should go beyond and look at developing a stakeholder-based understanding of groundwater across sectors and geographies. Yes, overexploitation is surely, let me paraphrase it differently. Overexploitation and contamination are often coterminous. While contamination is prevalent in areas that haven't suffered groundwater exploitation also, some problem or the other with groundwater quality is usually observed in areas where there has been severe groundwater exploitation. And I think therefore, when we look at solutions, we are actually looking at a double whammy of problems of exploitation and contamination. So an already stressed resource is further stressed if contamination creeps in, and especially with serious contamination, it's a question of health security as well. And my last point, which was your last question, of the emergence of new inequity among the farming community, but I'm going to take the liberty of expanding or extending that question, not just to the farming community, but to the community at large. And I have, I'll sort of end with these 4 points on that question. First and foremost, I believe it is an established fact that groundwater will continue to be the first option as a dominant source of irrigation. And I'm saying this because we have a history where our push for surface water irrigation was very strong. But in many areas where it has not reached, groundwater grew, it continues to grow, its usage continues unabated. Now, leading from that, I believe social, economic, and hydrogeological factors all contribute to various forms of new inequities. And these new inequities are seldom again recognized, acknowledged, studied. As aquifers are exploited and their stocks deplete, factors relating to hydrology, relating to the access infrastructure, which is the engineering, the economic capacity to find alternatives, and the wherewithal to get into this newfound competition with other users, with other uses, establishes new inequities with every passing phase. I mean, you look at the hinterland or your work, Janak, for example, on peri-urban. Let me take that example. I mean, you look at the peri-urban areas or geographies of India, anywhere, and you try and understand what's happening to groundwater there. So it's not just about the established inequities in agriculture or agriculture water. It's also this growing tension between whether it's profitable for me to grow a crop on the well that I have, or to sell the water so that it can be supplied to urban centers, to, through tankers. The entire system of tankers is based on this fulcrum of newfound inequities. And I think we need to look at these a lot more closely than what we are looking at now. So what I'm saying is at every passing phase of exploitation or growth, so growth on one side and exploitation on the other side, these are two sides of the same coin. I think it adds new dimensions on inequity. Over and above that, contamination adds to the woes in access, and people tend to spend money on a whole bunch of options. I mean, we, for example, in cities, tend to spend a lot of money on filters, because we're not sure where the water is coming from. And therefore, we have come to a situation which is almost going back to Professor Mohan's words, and I would like to end this on that note, that, like I said, we have come to a situation where we are saying to each his own, which is that the push to fend for ourselves individually is growing by the day. And this is perhaps truest when we look at the groundwater situation in India. And I think the only way to turn this around is through the process of participation, because participation and cooperation led the way coming into this century. Participation and cooperation, these are not new terms. Community wells, community management, sharing of wells was there for the last thousands of years. So therefore, cooperative community managed groundwater approaches will be the only way that will lead us to overcome the question of inequities. COVID-19 provides us lessons around this very paradigm in a very, very hard and challenging manner. I only hope that we pause, learn, and bring these lessons home to the domain of participatory groundwater management and governance by integrating good science. By science, I mean transdisciplinary science. Let me not get into the details of that, but also ensuring how we can demystify science to bring in a larger amount of water literacy or groundwater literacy in India. Whether we are working in the command areas of dams, whether we are working in the rural hinterlands where groundwater is the only sort of source of water supply, or whether we are growing into working in the growing urban centers. I believe the domain of participatory groundwater management and governance is here to stay. And That's the only way we can look at prioritizing equity or equitability alongside efficiency and sustainability of groundwater in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Himanshu, for this wonderful presentation. In fact, a lot of questions. In fact, I also compliment you for really dwelling upon the many important issues. I will perhaps come back to one or two issues at the end, which particularly I want to discuss more on the Tushar's comment on the lender of last resort. That's very interesting, and I'll come back to it now. Professor Elango, who is the hydrogeologist, a very well-known teacher and researcher in Anna University, with a very vast experience in groundwater modeling, remote sensing applications, groundwater quality assessment under water governance, and is published very widely. He knows the subject very well, and is very well known across the world in this particular area of research. Professor Elango, I've got only 3 questions to you. Question number 1. There is a great need.
I would like to have the questions one by one, sir. I don't have a memory like the previous speakers.
No, the question number 1. There is a great need to protect groundwater resource through innovative governance strategies. There is a greater need to protect groundwater resource through innovative governance strategies. Having been sort of involved in the government, governance in a way, you've been a part of many committees. Can you really explain the challenges in groundwater governance? What are the challenges? Is it that easy? It is easy for me to say that you have to really govern. Now, do you think these existing legal mechanisms are inadequate or ineffective? That is question number 1.
To answer you very quickly, certainly it is not possible. Certainly it is not possible. The existing legal mechanism is also certainly inadequate. The main reason for we failing in groundwater governance, already as the speakers have said already, it is very difficult to implement governance as groundwater is owned by all of us. We really don't bother. If you take the agricultural field, every farmer has his own well and he is free to pump any amount of water, and the power is also given free. And now they are talking about dispensing with that, but at the same time we are now encouraging solar pumps, right, which is going to come into play at the larger level. So absolutely there is no control we can have over that. And on the other side, in terms of urban needs, though there are some control in some cities, still in many large cities, nobody pays based on the quantum of water that they use. Right? So over there also we are unable to bring in governance. And in the case of industries, there is some amount of governance, but that is not at all adequate. As we have been discussing, the major consumer of groundwater in India is the agricultural farmers, right? They are consuming about 70 to 80% of our groundwater. So in order to bring in good governance, we should bring in some mechanism to control the usage of groundwater. As rightly said by Himanshu, while the smallest of small farmers are bringing in innovation, because he is left out with small amount of water, small land, and he is bringing in a lot of innovation. But on the other hand, our big farming communities or even companies who have gone into big farming, they literally don't bother to bring in governance because they have large amount of money. With the technology that is available today, we are able to do good. We are bringing in a lot of technology for exploration. We are able to see the subsurface of the earth up to at least 500 meters very clearly. And we have technology also to drill deep wells. So there is no innovation or governance for the large farming communities. Hence, if we want to bring in governance in India, we should bring in by making even the farming community to pay per liter of water which they use, like in many other countries. I think that is what I would like to say with regard to this. Very brief.
Okay, now I have a second question to you, which is that you as a hydrogeologist, you have worked extensively. as you know very well, in many parts of the country, we are mining groundwater. Mining is taking place where recharge is not possible by definition. So do you think we will be in a position to recharge even at that level? In which case, in many parts, we are also reaching towards that stage of mining. Many parts of the country, we are going towards that stage. So what is going to be the future of groundwater use in the country?
Certainly, it is really difficult to recharge deeper aquifers because the consumer of deeper aquifer water is at one place, whereas the recharge must be taking place at a distance of beyond sometimes even 100 kilometers. So it is really difficult to recharge a deeper aquifer at the place where we are consuming water. It requires thorough knowledge, three-dimensional knowledge of deeper aquifers, and we need to locate the recharge structures far away from the place of use. Hence, it is literally impossible, I can say, to recharge aquifers which are very deep, and the recharge area for that may be very far away from the place where we are consuming the water. Hence, the only way forward is to control the use of groundwater. Beyond that, I think we cannot do. So, at this rate, if we are pumping and using groundwater, right, certainly we are going to have a blink future. Until otherwise, we bring in some measures to reduce the use of groundwater, especially for farming from the deeper wells. The way forward may be, as I told you previously, is to control the use of groundwater. So everywhere we are, as any Indian or any person, any human being is very good, right? If I give 1 liter of water today and I have to survive with that for a day, I think I will be able to do. Right? If I'm given 20 liters, still I'm able to do. If I'm given 2,000 liters, I'm able to spend that in a day too. Right? So mindset, I don't think it will change, right? So only way is, right, make them to pay for every liter of water used. That the payment may be 0.1 paise, right? But that will make them to use water judiciously. Right? I would like to also differ that people are not really aware of use of water, right? Misuse of water. In a city like Chennai, I think each and every individual is aware that water is so precious, and they are really interested in conserving it. But they will do so when they get only 20 liters per day, they will be able to conserve. If they get 2,000 liters per day, they don't have the mindset to conserve because they are not made to pay for 2,000 liters. That is it.
That's a very good answer, Professor Elango. I have another question to you, which is with regard to the groundwater energy in Asia and South America and even Western and Eastern African countries. Is it okay now, sir? Can you hear me now?
Now it is okay. Yeah.
Right. So I was saying the issue of groundwater energy food nexus is an issue being discussed all over the world, yes, particularly in South Asia, South America, and West and East African countries. Now, the important issue that I would like to bring forth here is, you mentioned that every liter of water that is being used for agriculture should be measured and should be taxed, or should be farmers should be should pay for it. I agree with you, but today, as you know very well, I mean, this is a debate. I am only trying to prompt you. Yeah. Today, as you know very well, in fact, as Himanshu himself was saying, 80% of the farmers are small and marginal. These are the farmers who are loss making. Small and marginal farmers and medium farmers who were using earlier the surface water for irrigation, today, in a way, they are forced to use the groundwater for agriculture. They are all loss-making industry. Yes. Agriculture is now, in a way, a loss-making industry. Yeah. If you are going to charge them, how are you going to really meet your food security? Yes. It's a very, very important issue. Is here already you will see all over the country, hundreds and thousands of farmers are committing suicide. Do you know why? Because they made lots of investment on groundwater, but then the wells and borers are not yielding sufficient water for their agriculture. So, and they commit suicide. In fact, I wrote a paper in Economic and Political Weekly. The title of the paper itself was, are wells a potential threat to farmers' well-being?
Farmers, so
Wells have become a potential threat to farmers' well-being. So you keep investing on wells, but then wells do not yield sufficient water. Therefore, I don't even break even and I commit suicide. This has happened in Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, in many parts. So how are we going to really make this point, particularly when you suggest that we have to make every farmer to pay for every liter of water that he uses?
So one way forward to tackle this problem is, first of all, I fully agree with the comments you made. One way forward is, if you look at the way in which today the electricity bills are charged, why not we think of charging for the groundwater usage for the land owners who possess beyond, let us say, 1 acre or 5 acres. We should start somewhere, right? Because by just highlighting the pathetic condition of the small farmers, I think the big landlords are trying to enjoy and loot the groundwater. Right? Not only the landlords, but also in terms of business dealing with the supply of drinking water, right? Big companies. So everybody is able to loot groundwater because absolutely there is no regulation. A year ago, something like water conservation fee was brought in. It was a very good legislation, but it was turned down and it never became operational. Still, they are now working on to revise that. So nothing has come out. Right? Even in that, right, they had come out with a scheme. Right? Those who are possessing beyond 15 horsepower pumps, or those who are pumping beyond this level, they are made to pay some conservation fee. So we should begin by considering this aspect. This is my feelings, right? By citing this farmer suicide, I fully agree, right? Especially as rightly put forth by Himanshu, right? The smallest and small farmers are very much affected by this, right? They are having a well of about 40 feet, but adjacent to that, a big landlord builds a 1,000 feet well and starts sucking the water. That's all. The whole livelihood is gone for this person. So he's bringing in innovation, right? He changes its crop, maybe from paddy to some pulse, which doesn't require a large amount of water. So that is what has made him to decide or think about the suicide. So why not we start with the landlords who own area beyond certain level, right? That level is very big question to answer, or it is a big debate, right? We need to have a big debate on that, but we have to begin somewhere. Is my answer for the question which you have put forward.
Thank you, Professor Elango. One last question to you as a professor and a researcher of a very long, very high reputation. One last question to you. Now we have had 3 panelists, and including you, the 3 panelists. Morgan spoke, and I also spoke a little bit. Now I want to ask you, given the fact that we are facing problems of this kind, as a researcher and a professor, what do you think should be the future directions of research on groundwater? What do you think should be the future directions in groundwater research?
The first and foremost is we have still not understood the quantum of groundwater that is available today with us, especially as you rightly said, we are still not clear about the groundwater that is available at deeper zones. And how much of groundwater, number 2 is how much of groundwater we lose, how much of groundwater is lost to the sea, right? Especially from the west coast, there will be some amount of groundwater which is lost. I should not use the word lost, because that water is also necessary for the healthy marine life, right? How much of groundwater is lost. And thirdly, what are all the innovative ways of trying to recharge the water at deeper zones? And fourthly, how we will be able to use the water wisely, right? Nothing, whatever I said, nothing is new. This is new for our country, but in other countries, they have been doing wonderfully well. If you take Israel, they have brought in highest level of technology, right? If the whole surface of the land is covered with a plastic sheet, only they put a hole through which the plant grows, and they put a meter on the leaf. Depending upon the amount of transpiration that has taken place on that day, so much drops of water is being used for irrigation, and the water used is also coming from the sea, desalinated water. So the technology is already available. It is being practiced everywhere. Only thing which we don't have is we don't have sufficient funds to bring in that to the level of a smaller scale farm. So I want to reiterate that what the research is necessary to understand deeper aquifers, to quantify the groundwater that is available at a real time scale. We need to also say, as we were discussing, what is the quantum of recharge that has taken place in the last year, how much we are exceeding, what is the level of depletion that is happening today. This has to be given like a kind of maybe like a weather forecast, maybe to make the people aware how much of water we are losing every day. But this is also being done in India at a smallest level. I'm sure many projects done by Himanshu in basaltic region, they have formed a small communities where they are judiciously using the resources. They have their own community. They decide how much of water can be used during the next month and so on. But at a larger level, what we are doing is not sufficient.
Thank you.
On these things, we can carry out our research.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Elango. I think it's a wonderful panelists we have had. And lots of issues have come up now for discussion. And we have got exactly, say, 30 minutes or so for discussion. Now, Jayan, can you manage the questions now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Jayan, please pick up the questions, and then let us pick up all the questions, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Yeah.
Sure, sir. So the first question is from Ms. Anjali Deshmukh from the Pondicherry Engineering College, and her question is that can we use the treated wastewater from the STP for recharging the groundwater instead of letting it go into the sea? So I'm sure I'm sure like concerned panelists can take up the question, sir.
Maybe if you
take, Jayan, may I suggest why don't you just Jayan, if you can read out all the questions, the panelists can choose which one they want to answer, because then we won't be able to manage given the time duration that we have at our disposal. So please read out all the questions. I would request all the panelists to pick up which one they want to answer. Yes, please go on.
Sure, I'll just go on to the second question. Yes, the second question is about where the groundwater recharge should be done in a river basin. Which part of a river basin should be used for groundwater recharge? Is a question from Mr. Sachin. So that is the second question. And the third question is about the GIS application. So this specific question is from Mr. Vaibhav. The question is that what are the mountain specific, Himalayan region mountains, technique or corrections in RS and GIS application? Because the RS and the GIS accuracy, it tends to get reduced in mountains. So how does one overcome these challenges in using this GIS application in mountainous region for mapping the groundwater aquifers? And we have the fourth question from Mr. Vishwanath S. from Bangalore. And his question is directed to Mr. Himanshu, wherein he want to ask about the successful projects in the urban and rural areas, especially in concern with the rural areas and industry. How do they manage the groundwater commons collectively? So that is his question, the fourth question that we have, sir.
Okay, the panelists can choose which one they want to answer.
I would like to respond to the first question, right? Yes, the use of treated water for recharging groundwater is being practiced in many parts of the world. But however, in India, we are yet to come out with the guidelines, because there is a fear, as said by the previous panelists, or also Professor Janakarajan. In India, already we are trying to contaminate deeper aquifers by illegally pumping the sewage, right? Climbing zero liquid discharge company. So being, since we are in that situation, right, in India, we are yet to bring in a legislation to use treated wastewater for recharge at a larger level. I think I forgot about the remaining questions.
Yeah, other panelists would like to respond.
Answer the
Jothiprakash?
second question. Where to do groundwater recharge?
Yes.
Very nice question, sir. I think I have explained in my previous speech also. First, we have to identify appropriate location. Appropriate location is whether there is an aquifer which can take the water which we are going to recharge. That is identification of appropriate site. Second one is identification of appropriate rainwater harvesting structure. So if we are successful in these two, we can do groundwater recharge in any location in a river basin, right? For example, I told the south, we all know only about tank, right? Irrigation tank. But our forefathers have constructed a tank such that the runoff will not come directly to the irrigation tank. First, it will start from Kulam, Kuttai, Urani, Yendal, Tangal, Karanai, Kanmai, Eri. Then from Eri, it goes to river. These are all small area or small pits, small structure which stores the water. It is not just storing, it is increasing the infiltration opportunity time. So whatever the structure which increases the infiltration opportunity time will help to increase the groundwater availability.
Yeah.
I don't know, in our villages, everybody says that there is large sedimentation in the irrigation tank. Actually, there is a series of tanks. In that, there is a one tank called Karanai, right? You know Karnakaran, right? It's our elephant foot tuber. Actually, the sediment, clay type sediment, gets deposited in that Karanai. So the pot maker actually searches for this Karanai, brings that type of soil to make the pot. He will not take the silt or clay deposited in any of the irrigation tank. That means it is not a single structure type of rainwater harvesting. We need to go for integrated rainwater harvesting structures to improve the groundwater availability in any river basin or in any aquifer. So that is for the first question, sir, where to do groundwater recharge. And there are several studies, right? Like Professor Morgan's report on effectiveness of percolation ponds. One was great successful story. Another one is failure story. Successful story, since it is my native place, I am still watching that. In 1982, a small percolation pond has been constructed there. Then at that time, there were no water availability in the downstream side for 200 meters from that pond location. Then first 5 years, 10 years, the water availability in the wells have increased for one season, right? In that earlier it was farmers used to go for only irrigated dry crop. Then they switched over to irrigated wet crop, rice. Then after 5-10 years, the farmers were still water was there in the well. They went for irrigated dry crop. So they increased to 2 seasons. Now I think the project was completed in 96, I think so. Sir, I think I am correct, sir. Every week go there and do that. What is the influence of this percolation pond? 200-meter downstream side, right? Now my village, that particular area, people have gone for cash crops. They have not increased their depth of the well. It's an open well, 20-25 open wells. But they ensured that percolation pond receives water every year, once or twice. And the failure story, the irrigation tanks, sir, Karthikeyapuram, the percolation pond has vanished, sir. Everything has become now urban area. So that is successful story. And we can do groundwater, sir, when we select appropriate aquifer and appropriate type of rainwater harvesting structure. Coming to
Thank you, Jothiprakash. Now we are running short of time. Now I am going to request Himanshu to respond.
Yeah, so just 2 quick responses on the first 2 issues also before I come to Vishwanath's question. So I think treated wastewater also, there are examples and there is a lot of learning, especially from the large scale, I wouldn't even call it an experiment, but the large scale effort that's happening around Bangalore. But effectively, I think recharge itself must be looked at through sort of very systematic process, like the internationally accepted managed aquifer recharge movement that has happened, has a clear set of protocols on what to do, how to do, and so on and so forth. And Jyoti also was referring to a part of that process. The second question, I really could not help myself on the mountain specificities. And I'm going to sort of skirt the remote sensing GIS part of the question by saying that, I think the process is similar. And we've actually done a lot of this work in the Himalayan region in terms of reviving springs in different locations, with different partners, including the government, including researchers, including research institutions. And what we have come up with is a sort of customized, innovative approach of even bringing in remote sensing and GIS to bear upon this process. However, working in the field, data from the field, there's no replacement for that. Coming to Vishwanath's specific questions, and I would sort of look at 2 or 3 examples. One is the urban groundwater effort. And one of our first experiments, I would say, was actually in Bangalore, where through a people's participation, we were able to map through social narratives, and with the help of hydrogeology, we were able to conduct a certain degree of aquifer mapping. And based on the aquifer mapping, we were able to come up with what is called community level recharge. So integrating the individuals at a community level, at a scale, through a very systematic process. In Pune, we are doing something similar. The second example I would like to give you is in the rural hinterland, which is where we've established a systematic protocol of almost 7 different steps, going from a situation analysis through hydrogeology, data collection, decision support, and action, which integrates both supply and demand side management, which also brings to bear what is called an aquifer-based groundwater balance, and comes up with a set of solutions, whether it's groundwater recharge, whether it's demand management, whether it's collectivization. And the third example is the example of springshed management. And I'd like to really talk a little bit about springshed management to end my little response, because it's a classical case of how perhaps the greenest source of water on the earth, which does not require any energy, which does not require any access mechanism like a well, and around which people have collectivized for centuries, has gone astray. I mean, it's a consequence of many factors. I won't go into that. And it was somewhat challenging to bring around people to a common source, a community source, based on the fact that with the modern technology coming in, a lot of the mountain folks also started taking their own sources rather than using a spring as a community source. So you go from a green to a not so green source, like a well or a bore well or a deep tube well. And how do you therefore bring back this whole system of springs? And we did this through a participatory, very, very demystified hydrogeological process, which is paying dividends now in many parts. So these are the 3 quick examples that I gave you. All of these examples have science, have participation, and have some semblance of community governance around them. So with that, I think, I don't know if I've satisfied Vishwanath, but I've tried.
Thank you. Now, actually, we have overshot the time. Therefore, I think it's time to close with some observations from my side. In fact, Himanshu, in his presentation, he made the point that Tushar made a point that the groundwater is the lender of last resort. Actually, Himanshu, if you really recall, the groundwater was the lender of first resort. It was forced upon farmers when the new biochemical technology was introduced in the country. Because when Green Revolution technology was introduced, you can grow 3 crops in a year. The available tank water and canal water was not sufficient to grow 3 crops. So the only readily available water resource was the groundwater. So everybody had to rush for groundwater to make use of the benefits of the new biochemical technology. Therefore, I would say it was the lender of a first sort, not the lender of last resort, as Tushar was saying. Again, Tushar also made one other point, if you recall. He in fact made a book called Wealth and Welfare. Wealth contributed to the welfare of the farming community. In fact, subsequently in the late 80s and early 90s, I made a paper called Wealth and Welfare. Wealth contributed to the welfare, not really the welfare, because it really created all kinds of problems. The dynamics actually is very well documented in my book. I don't have time to explain that now. I have one question to all the panelists here and also the participants. To what extent the remote sensing application gives you an idea about the extraction, over extraction and the depletion process that has been started now in the country? Is a remote sensing application possible? Will it be useful at all to get that to get some idea about the depletion process? That is something which is really very helpful if you can do that. Now, with regard to the recharge, I kept raising this issue to all the panelists, how to really reach the level when the mining has started. The level of 600, 700, 800 feet. Once you go to that level, it is going to be. So what is the sound there? So it's going to be really impossible for us to reach that level. So I'm just wondering if we can make use of the failed bores and the failed open wells. If you convert them into recharge structures, will we be in a position to reach that level? That's the only way. There are millions of failed bores. The millions of failed wells, open wells. Why not the government make an effort to convert them into recharge structures? That is one way we can really reach that level. One issue that we are really not discussed is the coastal aquifer. Coastal aquifer is now getting more and more saline, particularly in the deltoic regions. And this is going to be a kind sort of a permanent damage. And how are you going to really undo that damage? And lastly, one issue which I thought I would, flag off here is the land subsidence. There's a lot of research going on which suggests that over-exploitation of groundwater results in land subsidence, sinking land. And it happens in the delta lands, and particularly in the Kaveri and Krishna. I have observed that there is a lot of land subsidence taking place, and also many other parts. Is it proven now? Is it proven that is it in a way contributing to the land subsidence, an issue which we really have to take very seriously? Now, these are my observations. And Mohan, do you have anything else to say? You are the chair of the IWA, so I would think you should have the last word.
Okay, sir, I have 2 points to mention as a final thing. Sir, it's good that try to think of wastewater, treated wastewater, recharging the ground. But I think that I'm not pessimistic, but please understand now the wastewater is not treated to remove all the contaminants. We have pharmaceutical which goes inside. We have our health care and even beautify, every material that it goes into wastewater. We are not removing it. We are only removing DOD, COD, and this is what is called emerging contaminant. It is still there, and let us not spoil the groundwater. On the other hand, if I can do with the rainwater and then recharge the groundwater, I think that is the best thing that what we can do. Revive the tanks, revive where the temple tanks, and then use that as a thing rather than don't because they want to find somehow to push the wastewater. Let us not spoil the groundwater. That is the only thing which is better. I think I am little more vocal. Let us not do that particular one. And on the other hand, the wastewater, there is a lot of usage. You can go for irrigation. People can take the treated wastewater and use it for industries. I think there is a lot of use rather than sending it to groundwater. I think this is one point that I wanted to make it clear. The second point which I would like to share it with you, my simple experience. One time one person came to me and then asked me to design a rainwater harvesting system for his house. I said, okay, I can design and then give it. But he finally said one condition, my neighbor is my life enemy. So I don't want any water to go to the next person. I said, I cannot design a system which cannot go to the next person kind of a thing. The groundwater is more socialist. Then he said, I don't want the rainwater harvest. That is a way that people think in a different way, which I never imagined in my life, that this is the way that people will think on rainwater harvest. So my request is, let us do the recharging with rainwater first. If that is not at all possible, let us go for, even though wastewater is good, but wastewater, we are not treating the emerging contaminants or pharmaceutical, whatever we don't want. We are putting all tablet ever into the wastewater, which goes into the thing. We are not removing it. Kindly look at it. We don't have a good standard. And whereas in Saudi Arabia, somebody was telling, Saudi Arabia, if I do a mistake, my head will be chopped off. But here it is not. Maximum, I will put 500 rupees fine. But the groundwater will be going out. So let us not make something that which is a little more, that is only thing that it is better, and we should not pollute that. That is the only point I just wanted to make as a final thing. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. All the panel members and Professor Janakarajan have given mainly, I think, a good awareness to groundwater. It is now, it is not out of mind, it is more in the mind than in the anything else. So I am sure that more than 200 minds are now thinking about groundwater. Thank you very much from the IWA. A formal vote of thanks is given by the Secretary, Professor Chandran.
Chandran? Yeah.
So now I welcome Dr. Chandran. He's Associate Professor with Tyagarajan College of Engineering, and he is the Secretary of IWA India Chapter. Chandran, sir, please.
So good evening. Good evening. I request, I think somebody have to mute it. Thank you very much. It's a very nice evening. There is a rain in Madurai. I'm so happy. And also, as per your the suggestions, we need the rainwater harvesting through the tanks and other things. Today morning, I happened to visit one of the oldest temple tank in Madurai that is located in the heart of the city, that is the Town Hall Street. This tank is completely encroached on the four sides due to the court intervention. It was opened in one side. Now today only we are able to see what a kind of temple tank is sitting at the heart of the city. But this is where we have to really think of it for the commercial purposes. That is the most important point that we have been talking so far. For commercial purposes, our people are exploiting the natural resources. With these few words, I would like to thank our moderator, Dr. Janakarajan. The only word that I can talk about him is he is using his words as a sword. He is using his words as a sword. That's what we are seeing from the Chennai floods to up to today. So we are happy for being instrumental and organizing for this one, and especially brought all the peoples like Himanshu, Kulkarni and Jothiprakash sir and Dr. Elango sir along with the chairman. And we are really thankful to you for moderating the session in the most efficient way, sir. With respect to the panelists, Dr. Jothiprakash from IIT Mumbai, really we are able to get your inputs with the historical way of talking about the Tamil and other things, especially on the land use, how the land use have to be used for the groundwater recharge. It is something amazing from the Himanshu Kulkarni sir. We are so happy to convey you as a role model for the youngsters that you have to go to the field. That is very important. When we are listening to you with respect to the tribals and farmers and some of the statistics about 52% of the urban water is also from groundwater, it is really astonishing. There is really, and also your definition for the misuse. Really, the slogan that you quote is they don't know what they do. So how to convey that they are doing the mistake? This is the points that all the youngsters and the researchers and the people in the field, we have to take away. And Dr. Elango, our savior in the last minute, thanks to you, Professor, for accepting and giving your inputs very briefly and very relaxedly. And some of the most important messages like a deep aquifer may have a recharge zone at 100 kilometers. So what we have to do, sir? So for people like Chennai, for places like Chennai, Madurai, can we work on identifying the recharge zones? It may be of anywhere, and how to really satisfy the thirst of the people. So as a teacher, I am in touch with all my students. I am requesting the student to attend. So today itself, we have talked about the dams in the Western Ghats from Kanyakumari to Maharashtra to Mumbai. So all these dams, especially in Tamil Nadu and Kerala and Karnataka, our forefathers, and especially the last 50 years from 1950 we did. So the surface water is really managed at least. What about the groundwater? The new commitment for the youngsters of researchers on the field, this groundwater management will be the very important point for your potential for your job. My request to the chairman of the IWA Executive Committee is, can we really work on how to create the employment and research opportunities for the youngsters in the water field? Sir, it is from the bottom of my heart I am telling, there are people studying in water, both in water resource environmental, but switching over to all other jobs. Then who will take care of this? Surely there should be a platform that have to discuss and create avenues for them to really work on this domain. At the final, I would like to thank all the panelists and the moderator, and beyond that, the chairman and Dr. S. Mohan for creating this platform, for creating this opportunity to interaction of everyone. Apart from that, it is my kind duty to recall some of the speakers. I'm not some of the participants who are listening to is some senior most people like Dr. G.V. Subramanian, Engineer Tippuswamy, and the academic fraternity from NIT, Dr. Santosh Thampi, and Dr. NIT from Dr. Ramesh, and so many other people. And also, I'm really happy to see my EC members. In fact, Ashok Natarajan sir have raised a question. Probably I request Jayan to circulate this question to our panelists and we can answer for it. Thanks for it, sir. And Urmila Brigu and our Pundram sir from Coimbatore. And also I'm seeing senior most people. That is very, very important. This is a platform for everyone to at least see and interact. Senior most people like Engineer Muttumariappan from TWAD, Engineer Sridhar from, and Dr. Sridhar from hydrogeologist from TWAD and all other things. Apart from that, the team of IWA Chennai, IWA India office, Jayan and his team, Charles, and for their excellent cooperation and making it happen within a span of 3 to 4 days of arrangement. Thank you very much for every one of you to joining in this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank you,
a
sir.
lot, Chandran.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Himanshu.
you, thank you, thank you, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Thank you.
Janakarajan.
Thank you, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Professor Elango, for the
Thank you, sir.
last minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Himanshu. Thank you, all
Thank
the
you, sir.
panelists.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Have
sir.
a good
Good night.
have a good
Bye.
evening.
Thank you, Professor Mohan garu. Thanks.